West Virginia, oh my home, West Virginia, where I belong. In the dead of the night, in the still and the quiet, I slip away like a bird in flight. Back to those hills, the place that I call home. Just let me live, love, and let me cry. But when I go, just let me die among the friends who will remember when I'm gone. Hazel Jane Dickens was born here in Montcalm in Mercer County, West Virginia on June 1st, 1925. Her father, H.N. Dickens carried lumber for the coal mines during the week and was a fiery preacher at the local Primitive Baptist Church. Her mother, Sarah Aldora Dickens, looked after and raised 11 children. Before his religious conversion in his 20s, H.M. was a powerful and highly emotive singer and an accomplished old-time banjo player. Although he stopped playing, he didn't restrict music from the home. There was music everywhere, in the church, on porches, at dances, and of course on the radio. Every Saturday night, the family would gather around and listen to the Grand Ole Opry beaming in from Nashville. In the 1950s, Dickens followed two of her brothers to Baltimore to find work in the factories there. They all were soon playing music together at dances and parties. At that time, Baltimore had an exciting music scene as throngs of musicians moved there from the country in search of work. These Appalachian transplants of the region tended to stay close together, and playing music was an important part of retaining their culture. There, bluegrass and country music met folk music from people like Mike Seeger, a young musician and musicologist. Seeger was impressed by Hazel's singing and encouraged her to become more involved with the local music scene. Shortly thereafter, Hazel met a guitar player and singer from California, then named Alice Foster. Initially performing in living rooms and at local parties, Hazel and Alice were soon playing at festivals and other regional venues. Their first album, Who's That Knocking, was released in 1965. Hazel Dickens and Alice Gerard are considered to be the first women to lead a bluegrass band. They chose the songs, many of which they wrote, did the MC work, and hired the side musicians, breaking new ground for what had been a male-dominated music form since its inception. As she later became a major voice in the songwriting community, Hazel began to write about the injustices she had witnessed back home in mining country. One of her earliest and best-known mining songs, Black Lung, was written about her eldest brother, who died of the disease without leaving enough money to pay for his burial. In 1973, their next record, simply titled Hazel and Alice, was released to critical acclaim. The first side of the album was composed of traditional songs gathered from the radio, collections, and the Library of Congress. In contrast, the second side was composed of songs newly written by Hazel and Alice. Several of them became some of the most loved and important songs of Dickens' career. Although she was often called a bluegrass singer, Hazel Dickens was always transcended category, simply referring to her music as Southern mountain music, which included old-time bluegrass, country, ancient ballads, and old hymns, all forms she heard growing up in West Virginia. Hazel and Alice's next record came about in 1975. Dickens' songs increasingly told the stories of injustices she experienced, saw, and read about. She wrote about the hard work, dangerous working conditions, and low pay in Black Lung and the Mannington mine disaster, and about union conflicts in the Yablonsky River. She wrote about the plight of migrant workers like Little Linaldo and the mistreatment of women in terms of unequal pay and working girl blues. Mistreatment by some men and Don't Put Her Down, You Helped Put Her There, and in Old Callous Hands. In 1981, Hazel Dickens released her first solo album, Hard-Hitting Songs for Hard-Hit Women, followed by The Sweat of My Brow, and it's hard to tell the singer from the song. She also recorded a trio album, 1998's Heart of a Singer, and with friends Carol Elizabeth Jones and fellow West Virginian Jenny Hawker. Hazel Dickens is a mountain music legend, a bluegrass pioneer. While there were women in bluegrass before Hazel, both on stage and behind the scenes, she was the first to step up as an individual voice, a prolific songwriter and a musician. She took a stand in the songs she wrote, the songs she sang, and the way she sang them. Her singing was characterized by a powerful, emotional quality that echoes the soulful Appalachian sounds of her West Virginia home. Her singing exemplifies the high, lonesome sound associated with the best bluegrass singers of all time. absolutely heartfelt and sincere. Hers was an intense and impassioned voice that belonged to an earlier age. In Hazel's singing, you could hear what she was feeling: compassion, pain, longing, warmth, love, and sorrow. With Hazel Dickens, the singing and the song were inseparable. She sang about working class songs and women's music for more than 40 years. She made a name for herself as a writer and singer of soul-stirring songs about struggle and death in coal fields and the pain of leaving such hardship behind. She sang about the everyday life of real people with an honesty that points out the meaning and value of the ordinary and the commonplace. Many of Dickens' songs were autobiographical in nature. Others were about people she knew and places she had been. Hazel earned a devoted and respectful following from the women's movement, and she created a new canon of songs for women in bluegrass. She wrote and sang about aging, abuse of women, mental illness, and above all, the plight of working men and women, whether they were miners, migrant workers, or women toiling in a shop. Though many of her songs were topical, they feel as relevant now as they were then. In 1976, documentary film director Barbara Koppel came across Dickens' coal mining songs and asked her to write the closing song, "They'll Never Keep Us Down," for Harlan County, USA. The movie, which also included 3 other Dickens songs, went on to win the Academy Award for Best Documentary, which led to her performance at the New York Film Festival at the prestigious Lincoln Center. In 1986, she appeared and sang in John Sayles' film Negro about the massacre of striking coal miners in 1920. And all her songs have been used in nearly a dozen films, including her appearance in the movie and on the soundtrack of the movie Songcatcher. In 1999, a full-length Appleshot documentary was released on Hazel Dickens, capping her impressive career and entitled "It's Hard to Tell the Singer from the Song." In 2008, her biography, Working Girl Blues, The Life and Music of Hazel Dickens, was published. Her songs have been recorded by dozens of artists, including Dolly Parton, The Judds, and Tim O'Brien. Hazel Dickens has produced a remarkable catalog of songs, both political and personal, ranking among the most poetic and most respected in American roots music. Among the most decorated singers in any genre, Dickens has been awarded the Distinguished Achievement Award by the International Bluegrass Music Association and was inducted into the Preservation Hall of the Greats by the Society for the Preservation of Bluegrass Music in America. In 1996, Hazel's song "Mama's Hand" was voted Song of the Year by the IBMA. In 2002, she received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Folk Alliance International. In 2017, she was inducted into the IBMA Hall of Fame. In 2001, Hazel Dickens received the prestigious National Heritage Fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts, the nation's highest honor for the folk and traditional arts. Receiving this award is tantamount to being recognized as a national treasure. In the summer of 1996, the Smithsonian Institution's Festival of American Folklife presented a day-long tribute honoring Dickens. Entitled Hazel Dickens, A Life's Work, the program included performances by major figures in the folk and bluegrass fields who had been influenced by Hazel, followed by sets by Hazel and Alice and the Hazel Dickens Band. Hazel Dickens was invited to perform at the White House, the Smithsonian Folklife Festival 15 times, the Library of Congress, Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, the Spoletta Festival, the Brooklyn Academy of Music, as well as countless other venues in the U.S. and abroad. In addition to playing major festivals and many high-level venues, she regularly appeared at political events, protests, and on picket lines to support people and causes for which she believed. Hazel Dickens continued to write, record, and perform until her death in 2011. Her final studio album is slated for release in 2020, and a tribute album is also planned, which will include Emmylou Harris, Linda Ronstadt, Madeline Perot, Elvis Costello, Roseanne Cash, The Judds, John Prine, and others. One of Dickens' proudest moments was having the honorary degree of Doctor of Humanities conferred upon her by Shepherd College in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. She was further honored by receiving the Distinguished West Virginia Citation from the Governor of West Virginia, as well as the State of West Virginia Legislative Citation from the House as a spokesperson for the working class and those in emotional and financial need. In 2003, she received the Joe Hill Award from the Labor Heritage Foundation Her acceptance for her Lifetime Achievement Award from the West Virginia Music Hall of Fame, into which she was inducted into by Alison Krauss, Hazel said, and this is a quote, "I shall regard and hold this honor in the high esteem which I have always held and protected and carried forth the music and culture into which I was born. These rugged mountains and cold, dusty mining town and lonesome hollers have shaped my life and music for all time. Thank you, West Virginia, for your rich heritage you gave me in the past, and thank you for what you've given me today. I have received many honors and awards in my time, but this one will hold the #1 place in my heart. It gives me great comfort and pride in knowing that after all these years that me and my music now have a home." These sentiments are expressed eloquently in their song Down by the Riverbed. There's a path that leads back through my memories, and how often I've walked it these days, where I find sweet peace among the flowers on the grassy banks beyond the riverbed. Although she lived her later life in Washington, D.C., Dickens always had a special place in her heart for West Virginia. Fittingly, she chose to be buried in West Virginia, where she always felt she belonged. And speaking of most artists, one often hears them compared with their contemporaries. This was not the case with Hazel, who was a true original out there in a realm of her own. When George Jones, one of Hazel's favorite singers, sang, "Who's Gonna Fill Those Shoes?" we could have been talking about Hazel Dickens. Indeed, her music bridged many worlds. From the past to the future, from gospel to bluegrass, and from the country to the city, the echoes of the mountains continue to reverberate, and her music today is all in the dead of the night, in the still and the quiet. I slip away like a bird in flight, back to those hills, the place that I call home.